Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Shalom. I'm David Mencer, Israeli government spokesman. So for this press briefing, a quick update from me, and then to your questions, which you should put in the chat, all of which will take this Tuesday, the 20th of August, day 319 of the October 7th war. Dreadfully sad news to share regarding our fallen soldiers and the recovery of hostages killed by Hamas. We start today with the sad news of our fallen IDF soldiers, 694. Since the start of the war, Chief Warrant Officer Mahmoud Amaria was aged 45 from the northern Bedouin village of Ibtin. He was a soldier in the Bedouin Trackers Unit. He fell in combat in northern Israel from Hezbollah fire. Lieutenant Shachar Ben Nun was aged 21 from Petah Tikva. He fell in combat in southern Gaza. These are both devastating losses. All of us here in Israel send condolences to these dear families of our heroic fighters who fell in combat from the terror attacks and also our civilians. There are no words of mine that can assuage the terrible pain of their families and their friends. We embrace these bereaved families in their most difficult hour. We are committed to the testament of the fallen to continue to absolute victory over Hamas, but also Hezbollah. May the memories of our fallen soldiers be a blessing forever. Now, on our recovery of the bodies of our hostages. Firstly, the families of our dear hostages were informed. Then the Prime Minister shared that overnight our brave forces returned the bodies of 6 of our hostages that have been held by the murderous Hamas terrorists: Avram Munda, age 79, Alex Danzig, age 76, Chaim Peri, age 79, Yagev Buchstav, age 34, Yoram Metzger, aged 80, and Nadav Popplewell, aged 51, all of blessed memory. The Prime Minister expressed the emotion, I think, shared by almost all Israelis, that our hearts grieve over this terrible loss. All of us convey our heartfelt condolences to the dear families. The Prime Minister thanked the incredibly brave IDF and security service fighters and commanders for their heroism and their determined action. Their individual funerals will take place today and tomorrow. We say this loud and clear. The State of Israel will continue to make every effort, both diplomatic and military, to return all of our hostages, the living and the deceased. Now, we've been asked numerous times this morning, so I will share with you our latest assessment of our dear hostages. 109 men and women, including the elderly, children and infants, 109 remain hostage held by Hamas in Gaza. 36 are no longer alive. 73 are considered to be alive. We will not stop, not for a moment, from working in every way possible to bring back all the hostages, the living to the embrace of their families, and the dead to be laid to rest with the honor and decency denied to them. This is Israel's highest moral duty. Now on the hostage release deal, following Secretary Blinken's visit yesterday and the negotiations for this hostage release deal, Israel appreciates the efforts of the United States and the mediators to dissuade Hamas from its refusal to agree to a deal for the release of the hostages. The negotiations continue in order to form a framework agreement based upon the principles presented by the United States in May in a manner that will enable the return of the hostages while achieving all of the other war goals of this war. Now an update from COGAT and their work coordinating aid into Gaza. In the last day, in fact, in the last hour, COGAT and the IDF revealed that Hamas used the Mustafa Khaft school compound in Gaza City as a command and control center to plan and execute attacks. Hamas systematically violates international law and operates from within civilian infrastructure and shelters in Gaza, exploiting the Gazan civilian population for its terrorist activities. Our Air Force conducted a precise strike on the terrorists who were operating within the Hamas Command and Control Center, embedded inside the Mustafa Khaft school compound in Gaza City. Hamas terrorists used the Command and Control Center to plan and execute attacks against IDF troops and the State of Israel. Now, prior to the strike, numerous steps were taken to mitigate the risk of harming civilians, including the use of precise munitions, aerial surveillance, and additional intelligence. The Hamas terrorist organization systematically violates international law and operates from within civilian infrastructure and shelters in Gaza, exploiting the Gazan civilian population for its terrorist activities. But the IDF will continue to operate against the Hamas terrorist organization in defense of the civilians of Israel, as well as for a better future for the civilians of Gaza. Now, aid continues to enter every day via all the crossings. Since the beginning of the war, more than 46,000 trucks have delivered more than 900,000 tons of humanitarian aid into Gaza. That's 80% more food compared to prior to October the 7th. So that's the end of our briefing today. I will now take your questions, which you should put in the chat together with your news outlet. Thank you very much. First question here is from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. And your question, Joel, is President Joe Biden said last night in his address to the Democratic National Convention that the pro-Palestinian protesters on the streets of Chicago, who included some openly waving the Hamas flag and one wearing, sorry, could you just scroll up? There we go. Excuse me. Pro-Palestinian protesters on the streets of Chicago, who included some openly waving the Hamas flag and one wearing a swastika, had a point, in inverted commas. Biden never once mentioned the word Israel in his address. What's Israel's reaction? Thank you very much for that question, Joel. Well, firstly, let me say about the US, they have been side by side with us for decades and decades, and not least during this war. So we say very, very clearly to the people of the United States, but especially to the government and to the president, in common with our prime minister and all Israelis, it's Israel and our security services that remain on high alert because of the aggression which we're facing here in this country. And we have no stronger partner in the world than the US. For that, we are extremely grateful. The US government and our government here, we express our thanks to our allies standing together, united with us in the face of these hate-filled threats, not only on the streets of Chicago, but we know where the funding for these threats come from. We know that they come directly from the Iranian regime and its terrorist proxies. In particular, the government expresses its gratitude to President Biden and the American people for his leadership, for their steadfast commitment in words and deeds to the safety and the security of this country. As the president said, our own president here in Israel, together we stand side by side in the defense of the free world. Now, the international community stands together with Israel, not with these protesters, to curb the dangerous ambitions of Iran, which states its intention to destroy the state of Israel and threatens both regional stability and the free world. Next question here is from Jim Williams at Zenga International News Service, Washington, D.C. You gracefully pay honor to the brave IDF soldiers who have given their lives to protect not only Israel but the world. Is this the largest loss of life by the IDF in any previous war? Thank you very much for that question, Jim. I'd have to get back to you to precisely answer that question. Certainly the losses we faced on October the 7th and in the immediate aftermath are the largest day of Jew killing, unfortunately, since the Second World War and the Holocaust. But I'd have to come back to you precisely, if I may, on the question of fallen IDF soldiers. Next question here is from Reuters. Someone called May here from Reuters. Can you comment, please, on Channel 12 reports that the Prime Minister, in contrast to his comments in English following his meeting with Blinken, told the hostage families that it's... So you're asking here, let me take your question again, from Reuters. Can you comment, please, on Channel 12 reports that Netanyahu, in contrast to his comments in English following his meeting with Blinken, told the hostage families that it is not certain that there will be a deal and under no circumstances will we leave the Philadelphia corridor? Thank you for that question, May from Reuters. Look, the Prime Minister, I'm not sure where you're getting your information from, but whether in English or in Hebrew, the Prime Minister has been crystal clear. And let me lay out our position as put out by the Prime Minister. You know, many times it has been claimed for months now that Hamas would never agree to give up on its condition to end the war and remain in power as a condition for a deal. And some asked us to give in to Hamas's demands. Now, the Prime Minister has said that they were wrong then and they are wrong now. The Prime Minister and our negotiations team strongly insisted on this fundamental demand, vital to achieving the goals of the war. Hamas has changed its position. The Prime Minister insisted that Israel remain in the Philadelphia corridor in order to prevent terrorists from rearming. This is the vital oxygen which Hamas need to rearm. It comes through the Philadelphia crossing. It comes through corridor. It comes through that border, the tunnels, and other ways on that border with Egypt. Now, the Prime Minister has insisted on advancing a deal that will maximize the number of living hostages to enable the achieving of all of the aims of this war. Now, we're conducting these negotiations with a firm eye on the vital security interests of Israel, as opposed to those who advised us just to give in, for Israel just to give in. We're engaged in these negotiations for the release of our hostages because it is a national mission of the highest possible order. The Prime Minister has made clear that Israel is fully prepared to be flexible for this noble mission, but be in no doubt, these are very complex negotiations. Hamas is a murderous terrorist organization that is both simultaneously obstinate and uninhibited in its wickedness. Now, Hamas didn't even send a representative to the talks in Doha. The Prime Minister's made clear that strong military and diplomatic pressure on Hamas and on Sinwar are the way to secure the release of our hostages. I hope that that's made it crystal clear for you, May from Reuters. Next question here I can see is from Lior Soroka of the Washington Post. Netanyahu met today with bereaved families and families of hostages from the Gvura Forum. According to the families as cited in the Israeli media, Netanyahu told them it's not certain that there will be a deal. He, Netanyahu, will not give up on the Philadelphia corridor. Can you relate to their comments? Thank you, Lior. I think that's practically the same question as asked just a moment ago. So I've already answered that question. Of course, it goes without saying that if Hamas do not agree to a deal, as the Americans, as we read in the media, then that is not, we will do everything that we can to secure the release of our hostages and a hostage release pause. And we've also made very clear what the aims of this war are. The Philadelphia crossing, I've just made very clear about the importance of the Philadelphia corridor. It is from there that Hamas gets its additional fighters, additional terrorists can pass through there. Arms, deadly arms, weapons, rockets, missiles, all of the deadly weapons which they use to fight us, to try and destroy this country, they come through the Philadelphia corridor. We're shutting off that corridor, and the Prime Minister's made extremely clear why that corridor is of ultimate importance to stop those weapons shipments and terrorist shipments coming through those tunnels. Okay, I think that's the last question. So thank you for joining us today. We'll have another briefing at the same time tomorrow. Please do stay safe, and thank you for joining me. Thank you. Bye-bye.